Hey Fundraiser, I'm Mary Petersen, and this is Hey Fundraiser, the podcast for development professionals who are done guessing and ready to build a major gift program that actually works. Every week, I bring you the tactics, the language, and the real-world strategy to close bigger gifts, deepen donor relationships, and lead with confidence. Whether you're a one-person shop or a seasoned major gift officer, if you're ready to stop hoping and start engineering, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hey Fundraiser. Today we are talking about one of my favorite things right now, which is the concept of the small table. And specifically, the question I get over and over again, which is, Mary, what are we actually supposed to talk about at the table? Because here's what happens. Someone reads my book, Small Table, Big Philanthropy, and they get excited about the concept and they think, okay, this makes total sense. Instead of trying to get 300 people into a ballroom, we'll find one really great host. We're going to have 10 people that they know and trust around a dinner table. We sit at someone's home, we have dinner, we talk, we build relationships. There's no gala, no auction, and for the love, no PowerPoint. And there's no pledge cards like hiding underneath the dessert fork. So everybody loves the idea until they actually start planning the dinner, and then nonprofit brain takes over. You know what I'm talking about. Obviously we need a presentation. No, we should probably tell them about every single program we offer. No, we we should really have some compelling statistics. We have to show them all of our data. Maybe, but let's take a breath. And we have a budget deficit, so we definitely need to talk about that. Oh boy, no, no, no. This is where small table can very quickly become like big event in a tiny room, and we're not doing that. So before we get into this, if you haven't read my book, the entire strategy is laid out there, but I'm going to give you like the quick and dirty. Small table is a way to get in front of people you might otherwise never meet, almost by curating actually a perfect event with a host. A host is magic. They believe in your organization. The organization invites 2 or 3 couples. The host invites 2 or 3 couples. And because people either trust you or trust the host, they're willing to sit down. Now, your job that night is not to get a gift. Your job is to earn the next conversation. That's it. So we're building a deep relationship and taking it quite far in a very short amount of time. One of the best ways to build a relationship is to stop talking so much and ask better questions, which brings me to a conversation I recently had with a lovely woman who bought my book. So her name is Audra. Audra bought the book and reached out and said, okay, I'm having some trouble. Like she read the book, she got it, she understood that this was supposed to be like a personal, purposeful, conversational, relationship driven event. And she's preparing the small table concept for an organization doing incredibly difficult work with girls that have experienced sex trafficking and exploitation. So she loved the idea. She wanted to implement it. She brought the idea internal, and everybody liked it, which was lovely. But then they started talking about what are they going to actually talk about at this dinner, and suddenly she was kind of stuck in the middle of 2 completely understandable nonprofit instincts. Her boss was looking at the financial reality of the organization, and they have a budget challenge. And so her boss was thinking, here's what we need. We need money. We have people sitting around a table. Why wouldn't we talk about the budget? Like, why wouldn't we ask them, how can we fix this deficit? Meanwhile, a board member was coming at it from a completely different angle. The board member was thinking, we just need to explain the problem. We need to give them all the information. We need to give them the statistics. We need to show them how serious this is. And once they understand how bad the problem is, they're going to make a gift. And my client is sitting there thinking, I understand why both of you want to do this. And I'm also understand that this is not what Mary put in the book. And she was right, because here's the thing. Your budget deficit is going to be fascinating to you, right? Like you think about it constantly. Your board thinks about it. Your finance committee is neck deep in it. Your executive director probably wakes up at 2:17 in the morning thinking about it. Your donor, not so much. Your donor did not come to the dinner because they've always dreamed of helping someone balance a budget. Like that's not the vision. And this is where I think we get fundraising kind of backwards sometimes. So we have a financial problem inside the organization, and we take that financial problem to the donor and essentially say, here you go. Would you like to make this your problem? No, no, the budget problem is our problem. Your mission opportunity becomes their opportunity. Those are two very different things. And please do not hear me saying that donors should not understand what things cost. Of course they should. I'm the person who wants you to ask for big, unrestricted gifts. I absolutely want donors to understand the real cost of doing the real work. But here's the difference. Like, here's one way to put it. We're $500,000 in the hole on our budget. How do we solve it? Here's another way. What would it take to make sure this work is here for every girl who needs it? One is about your spreadsheet. The other is about your future. Donors fund the future. So I want you to remember this. Your deficit is not the invitation. Your mission is the invitation. And then we have statistics, right? Like we love our stats. We just do. We love them so much. We think that if donors just knew, if they just knew how many children were affected, if they knew how many people went hungry, if they knew how many patients delayed care, if they knew how many animals were surrendered, if they knew how many students dropped out, if they knew how terrible everything was, they are surely going to open up their checkbook. But that's not necessarily how people work. Statistics help people understand scale. They don't necessarily help people feel connected. And you absolutely use those numbers. Like, I'm not anti-statistic, but here's my rule. And, it goes back to food. If you know me, I love my food. Statistics are like seasoning, but they're not dinner. Okay. A little helps. A lot ruins the whole thing. Unless you ask my husband, who loves salt. Okay. So at Small Table, I would much rather give people a short pre-read ahead of time, a one pager, maybe two, no more than two fundraiser, please. And like, here's the problem. Here's who we serve. Here's a handful of numbers to help you understand the context. And here's what's happening right now. That's it. Then when everybody gets to the dinner, we're not going to spend 30 minutes bringing them up to speed. They already know. They want to come to this dinner ready to talk about the future. And then you can actually talk. And this is where the questions to the table really matter. Because a really good question that this group chews on can do what a 10-slide PowerPoint cannot. It can make someone think. It can make someone curious. It can challenge an assumption. It can make the issue personal, even when it's really arm's length away. And maybe most importantly, it can tell you what your donor actually cares about. So when I'm talking with Audra, I started asking her questions about the work. And what was fascinating was that I learned more from asking her questions than I ever could from like a presentation. So I asked her things like, well, how do these girls know they've been trafficked? What happens to a girl when she turns 18? Do the girls actually want to be in your program? Um, you know, how long does real change take? And then every answer she gave me, I was just like, oh my gosh, I have another question. I'm so sorry, Audra, but she was a good sport. That is what you're trying to create at your small table. You want everybody leaning forward and saying, whoa, 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 let's talk more about that. Like, that's a win. Not like, slide 9 was so informative. Oh, fundraiser. Okay, nobody's going to go home thinking about slide 9. So how do you create better questions? I think the best small table conversations move through a handful of different layers. First, start with what people think they know. Okay, I know we're going to go deep here for a second. For this organization, one of the questions we developed was, when you hear the words child sex trafficking, what picture comes to mind? So this is a fascinating opening question, because now when you answer, I know what you believe. Maybe the picture is a stranger rolling up in a van and abducting a child from their front yard. Maybe the picture is something that's happening in another country and not America. Maybe your picture is a dramatic rescue, but we need to understand what the people at the dinner are thinking. Then we can introduce a much more complicated reality. What if the person exploiting the child is someone she loves, not the stranger in the van? What if it's part of the home she grew up in? What if what you see as horrific simply feels normal to her because she's never known anything else? See, now you're thinking differently. And I didn't lecture you. I didn't correct you. I didn't make you sit through slide 9 that has 12 statistics. I just simply asked you a question. And you can do this with any mission you serve. Hey, fundraiser. Before you sign up for another fundraising conference where you might leave with a good tote bag but zero strategy to raise more money, let me invite you to Major Gift Momentum. This is my private coaching group where you'll get weekly coaching calls with me, access to my full Major Gift curriculum, and a community that's actually moving the needle. Major Gift Momentum isn't based in theory, it's based in action. Members are closing 5- and 6-figure gifts within 3 months of joining. Heather just closed a $245,000 gift. Jacelyn just closed a $212,000 campaign gift. And Georgette just got a $500,000 commitment. All within 3 months of joining Momentum. Each of these Momentum members didn't think the donor would give that much, but once I taught them my method, they are raising money at a whole new level. So would you like in, fundraiser? If you do, go to heyfundraiser.com/momentum and let's get started. If you serve people experiencing homelessness, when you picture someone who is homeless, what do you picture? Then you can kind of work toward broadening what their thinking is. Because my guarantee is what they think a person experiencing homelessness is very different from the reality. When you work in higher ed, you can ask a question like, when you hear that a student dropped out of college, what do you assume happened? It's probably shockingly different from what they assume. If you work in healthcare, when someone waits until a health issue becomes an emergency, what do you think kept them from coming in sooner? Some people would say, oh, it's probably the cost. No, actually, having worked half my career in healthcare, I know that women who have heart attacks at home, they tend not to call an ambulance because they don't want their kids to get upset. They don't want the neighbors to start looking out their windows. They don't want the ambulance rolling up. And then women sadly wait to get treatment because of the perception of how it looks. Like, there's deep stuff there. If you work in food insecurity, what do you think a family cuts first when there's not enough money at the end of the month? Like, you're always going to start with curiosity, then move from the big issue to one human being. And this is very important because nonprofits, I mean, we love to tell donors how many people we serve. And yes, sometimes scale is super impressive, but sometimes the work is not wide. Sometimes it's very deep, and that is okay. This organization might work with one girl under a roof for 12 to 13 months. They're not going out and saying, we work with hundreds of girls and rescue hundreds of girls. Audra, her organization can only have 10 girls at a time, but they keep those girls for 12 to 13 months and they go deep. I mean, that's expensive work. And if you lead with the budget, someone could easily look at it and say, whoa, 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 you're spending that much money to serve a few girls. But see, that's the wrong question. The better question is, what does it take to change the trajectory of one life after years of trauma? See, now we're talking about something totally different. One of the questions I suggested Audra use at her small table was, you know, the real change that the organization creates here is not quick or wide. It is one girl living under one roof for 12 to 13 months. What does it say to you that an organization would go that deeply for a single life? I mean, think about the conversation that's going to create. I mean, someone might say, that tells me you're committed. Someone else at the dinner might say, it makes me realize I think about impact in numbers, and that's okay too. Someone else might say, I cannot imagine what it would take to stay in a relationship when progress is not linear. Great. Now your ED can add context, not a speech, context. And here's the difference. Like, here's another question. If a girl has never known anything but exploitation, if that is simply home to her, why would she ever hope for something different? I mean, sit with that. Like, because now the people around the table start solving the problems in their head. They might say, well, she would have to experience safety. Yes. Where does she get safety? At Audra's organization. She would need somebody she can trust. Yes. Audra, at her organization, the ratio is like 1 to 2 or 3. Someone else might say, okay, she would need to be away from what her air quotes home is and need to go somewhere else. Yes, they got there on their own. This is a transition house. I didn't have to say, like, stand up and say, ladies and gentlemen, let me explain why we need this program. Like, they get there. They got there on their own. And this is the big small table lesson. Stop giving donors every answer. Let them think. Let them wrestle. Let there be a little silence. I mean, let the neurons in their brain connect everything, because when that happens, they're going to be much more connected to your organization. And plus, fundraisers, we're scared of silence. We really are, because then we feel like we need to jump in. Like, we have a great question and there's 3 seconds of quiet and we think, oh, this is going terribly. Like, I'm just going to answer my own question. No. Just let them think. Someone will answer. And if you've created an environment at that small table, and you're asking questions that actually make people think for a second, that's a good problem. Okay, another kind of question I love is one that lets donors think about you. And I want to be careful here. I'm not saying donors should redesign your programs. Your program staff are the experts. So just know, programming should drive philanthropy. Your philanthropy should never drive programming. So please do not leave dinner and redesign your entire service model because Bob, who's the CEO of the bank, had this awesome idea like over their arugula salad. No. That's not what I mean. But people love being invited into a thoughtful question. So here's another example. And this is one we crafted for Audra. We're rethinking part of our model. We want the girls coming into this program to have more choice and more ownership in the decision of coming to the program. Because when girls are forced to come to the program, like, they're constantly fighting us. They don't want to be there. They feel like we've taken them out of their home and all these things. When they have a choice and they're ready for change, it's a different experience. So if you, donor, were helping explain why that choice matters, how would you talk to people about it? Now look what happened. I told you something important about the work. I showed you that we're learning. I showed you that the problem's very complicated. And then I invited you to help me think about it. So suddenly you're not just sitting across from an organization, you're sitting beside us. And that's what partnership begins to feel like. The other thing is when you ask a question like that, if you're helping us explain why this matters, how would you talk about it? I mean, essentially, you're getting the words, the meaningful words from the donors themselves. That's a beautiful question. Okay. So again, partnership doesn't mean we have a $500,000 budget deficit. How do we fix that? That's not a great question. Like saying, please fix our budget. It, it doesn't, that doesn't, what we want is you're thoughtful. We value your perspective. Come closer. Because what happens is at this table, they're going to get to budget. They're going to get to budget all by themselves. And you don't even need to say any of that. So essentially, I'm saying translate the financial problem into a mission question. And I want to give you another example. This particular organization has pretty enormous staffing costs, right? They go deep with every single girl, and it's heavy work. You got to keep your staff, you got to pay them well, like all the things. The work requires intensive staffing because of the complexity of the girls that they serve. If I say, our personnel expenses are too high, how do we close the staffing gap? I've just made you a finance committee member. Like, hooray, congratulations. You didn't even know you were going to join the board tonight. But if I ask, what do you think consistency means to a child who has spent her life watching adults come in and out and then ultimately disappear? Whoa. Now we can talk about staffing, because the staff are not simply an expense line. They are safety. They are consistency. They are the adult who shows up every single day, and then the next day, and then the next day. And just as normal thinking human beings, the donor's going to ask. The curiosity is going to pull the financial information into the conversation. You didn't need to dump the operating statement on them before the appetizers were served. Like, this is another phrase that I want you to remember. The budget is backstage. Impact is like front stage. Your financial reality matters, right? It supports the work. Believe me, I literally said to somebody this morning, like, I'm so sorry. My worldview is so tiny because it's just revenue, 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 like all the time. Like, believe me, I know you need to pay attention. But this isn't why people showed up to the dinner. Now, eventually, I want the questions that you ask to become personal. Not personal, like, so Bill, how much are you worth? Like, no, we're not going to do that. And I know you wouldn't do that. I was just being facetious. But personal meaning is, what do you hope for? What matters to you? How do you see this problem? I mean, one of the questions I wrote for Audra was, if you could sit across from one of these girls 1 year from today, what's the one thing that you would most want to be true for her? Like, that's a good question, because listen, I mean, the answers are going to be gold. I want her to feel safe. I want her to finish school. I want her to have somewhere to go. I want her to believe that she is worthy. I want her to have choices in life. Your donor is telling you exactly what outcome moves them. And you didn't have to ask, what are your philanthropic priorities? Which, by the way, sounds like somebody is about to sell them like a donor advised fund. This is dinner. Talk about humans. That is really what I want you to remember. So, small table is not a fundraising tactic disguised as a dinner. It's literally a dinner. It's a room full of interesting people talking about something that matters. Yes, you have a strategy. Yes, you want the relationships to grow from this dinner. Yes, you eventually want these relationships to become philanthropic. But the way you get there is by being genuinely interested in the people sitting around that table and bridging it to your mission, not by like waiting for your turn to talk. So, one question I get is, okay, we're going to have dinner. How many questions do I need to put out there for this table? It's not 12. So please do not laminate a list of 12 questions. I would have 4, maybe 5 really good questions. And then I would have some backups just in case you need them. I mean, if a question takes 25 minutes of amazing conversation, stay on that question. Don't say, okay, we're going to, for time, we're going to go to the question number 3. No, like what you're trying to do is create dialogue. If you only get through 2 questions, but you have had amazing dialogue with these people, that big W. Okay, so you're not trying to finish the spreadsheet, and some of your best questions are going to be incredibly simple. I mean, somebody's going to say something, and you really want conversation. You want everybody around the table talking. But sometimes you might need to say, like, tell me more about that, or what made you go in that direction? Um, I'd love to hear what you think. What makes you say that? I mean, these are also great follow-up questions. And so your prepared questions simply get the conversation moving. They're just kindling, right? You're starting the conversational fire. So let me give you the simplest possible small table flow. Your host opens the evening. Your host, your lovely host, is going to stand up and say, we invited you here because I care about this organization. I thought you could bring something interesting to this conversation. Tonight, we are going to we're bringing a few thoughtful people together. We want to tell you about a problem that we're having, and we want you here to think. We want to hear your thoughts. What you're doing is you're setting a tone for conversation, like you're making it a safe, brave space for people to talk. Secondly, everybody's going to relax. You're like, when you start like that, they're like, oh gosh, what's coming? What are we doing? So your executive director might give 5 minutes of context, no more. I mean, 3 is better. 5 is okay. You can do it. Like, who are we? What are we seeing right now? Why does the thing you're going to talk about tonight matter to now? And then that's it. Like maybe a story, actually. And then stop and ask the first question and eat dinner. That's it. You don't need to tell them about every program. You don't need to explain your strategic plan. You don't need to show them the org chart. You don't need them leaving with the comprehensive understanding of your entire nonprofit structure. You need them to leave thinking 3 things. 1, that was an amazing event. 2, I learned a lot and felt like I gave some good advice. And 3, I want to be a part of this organization. That's it. I want them driving home still thinking about something someone said. I want them thinking about one of the questions the next morning. It was so deep. Like there's no room for surfacey stuff here. I want them calling the host 2 days later saying, I can't stop thinking about this dinner. That is success. But you're not trying to close gifts at your small table. You're really just deepening the relationship. Now, I'll tell you, these dinners, the ones that I have put on and worked with my coaching clients on, this dinner, I mean, I've seen people the very next day give a 6-figure gift. They'd never known anything about the organization before. And then I've seen people work the relationship for 3 months and get $1 million gift. The other thing is, if you ask for a gift that night, people are thinking from their checking account, right? They're like, oh, I could give 5K. I could just write a quick check and then I'm good. When they go home and they keep thinking about the event and they're haunted in a good way about the problem and how close they feel to it and how their thinking has changed, then they start to think about assets. They're like, oh, well, I do have this required minimum distribution I have to take, and I don't want that to come in as income and push me up to the next tax bracket. So, there's $75,000 I could just give to them. So they're going to start thinking about stocks and other things. So give them the time to think about gifting assets. They're not going to think that right at the table. They're going to think, oh, what do I have in my checking account? And, here's a check. So if you're planning one of these dinners right now and a board member says to you, oh, we need a lot more statistics, fine. Put some statistics in the pre-read. If your executive director says, we have got to tell them about the budget deficit, translate the deficit into what is at stake for the people you serve. If somebody says, but how will they know we need money? Fundraiser, they know. You're a nonprofit, they know. What they do not know yet is whether they care enough to come closer. That's the job of the dinner. And I'll tell you, a budget deficit is not going to help them come closer. So before your small table, I want you to ask yourself, what does your community misunderstand about the issue? What do you wish people understood about the people or clients you serve? What part of the work is harder than it looks from the outside? And maybe what are we learning right now? What are we wrestling with as an organization? What question would you genuinely value their perspective on? And please, fundraisers and executive directors, don't say you would value their perspective on your budget deficit. And what could become possible if you got this dinner right? What do I want to learn about the people sitting around this table? Like, I would start there, because better questions create better conversations, and better conversations create deeper relationships, and deeper relationships raise more money. It's really that simple. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, Mary, I get the concept. I want to do a small table, but I really need help like building the entire strategy. So I have two places for you. So one, grab the book. The book will give you the strategy behind small table, because it's actually a 3-pronged approach, and the dinner is only the first prong. And in the book, I walk you through the model, like how to think about your host, how to sell this internally, who belongs at the table, how to fit this into your larger major gift strategy. So you can get that at heyfundraiser.com/books. Now, if you already have the book, or you're just like, you know what, I want to do this and actually build your small table strategy with me, I do have a handful of small table intensives. So this is where we roll up our sleeves. We're going to get to work. Who are your best hosts? Who do we want around this table? What should the invitation say? What is the pre-read? We would build your questions together. What questions do you need to ask? What does the follow-up look like? Because the dinner is actually not the strategy. The relationship that comes after the dinner, that's the strategy. And I don't want you to spend 6 months planning the perfect dinner and then have no idea what to do with the people you just met. So we build the whole thing. So if you feel like you're ready to build a small table, you can find more information at heyfundraiser.com/intensive. And remember, your deficit is not the invitation. Your statistics are not the conversation. Your mission is the invitation. Your questions create the conversation. And the relationship is where the money comes from. So ask better questions, build better relationships, raise more money. Okay, fundraiser, I'll see you next time. Fundraiser, thank you for being here. This work you do, it matters. You are the bridge between generosity and impact, and don't let anyone, including the hard weeks, convince you otherwise. If today's episode gave you something useful, please pass it along. One share, one text to a colleague, one review on Apple Podcasts. That's how this show reaches the people who need it most. Come find me at heyfundraiser.com, and I'll see you next Friday.